Hey guys, welcome to the Simpademic. Jason with the Sunday afternoon version. And I wanted to talk about something today that is a little bit disturbing at this point. Gender dynamics between single men and single women are at an all-time low. And, we have the 4B movement, we have the Passport Bros movement, we have black pill channels, we have faceless black pill channels whose content creators don't have any accountability because we don't know who they are. And it wouldn't surprise me if Vladimir Putin was behind some of the black pill content, because he's always wanted to use social media to disrupt America from within. And this is where we're at with the gender dynamics, and what it's going to create in the future is quite possibly the destruction of our country. And men and women can point fingers at each other all day long, but it's not going to solve the problem. I don't have enough of a platform to have any influence on solving the problem. Even somebody like Billy Ray Brandt, who still has a substantial influence, although it's been shrinking by her own admission. The problem right now is that we have what's called the fertility rate. And that fertility rate, of course, is the number of live births for every fertile or basically able to have fertile woman out there. And just by basic logic alone, you would need 2.0 per eligible woman to replace the population and keep it steady. Now we've got things like crime and infant mortality and miscarriages that mean that you probably need to really have about 2.1. That seems to be the generally demographically accepted level of replacement level population and fertility. 2.1. I recently found out there's not just one state that meets this, but there's actually 3. But there's still only 3 states out of 50 that are meeting the 2.1 or exceeding it as far as fertility rate is concerned. Those states are the one I had earlier, North Dakota, and then there's also South Dakota and Utah. Utah for obvious reasons. The Dakotas because they're more traditional. And this has large implications for the country as a whole if we can't replace our population. Right now, the United States is at 1.71. Now, for examples of countries that are in terminal decline, I present the Koreas, both of them. Right now, North Korea is at 1.26. South Korea is at 0.71. Let's chew on that for a minute. In South Korea is in such terminal population decline that out of every 200 women, we're only seeing 74 births. And in North Korea, that 1.26 number means that each generation is 74% smaller than the previous one. And both countries are probably going to wipe themselves off the map. Now, in North Korea, the reasons are obvious. We've got, economic decline, you've got famine, you've got, basically people not able physically to give birth because of those economic and resource reasons. South Korea, it's a little different. The 4B movement, which originated in South Korea, likes to give itself credit for causing that particular fertility rate decline, but that's not quite true. In South Korea, a lot of it is economic, and a lot of people can't afford to bring children into this world in South Korea. So that's why theirs is at such a disparagingly low number. Now you get to the United States, and the states that are holding their own, or even growing in this regard, are more conservative states. with more conservative values, which runs counter to what we see on social media as a whole these days. And a lot of what we see on social media with the MGTOW movements and the 4B movement and women acting, setting extreme standards that are unattainable. And now women see this and then they also imitate that, but men also see that particular type of content and they simply believe that they can't date. They don't have any chance, because they don't make enough money to meet those standards. They don't make $200,000 a year. They're not 6 feet tall, so they just give up because they don't believe they have any chance. And they believe it would be a futile effort. And with the way modern women are in the United States these days, it may actually be futile. So how do we go about fixing this before the United States goes the way of before we find ourselves in the same position as the Koreas, where our fertility rate is so low that our population starts to decline? Now, South Korea and the United States have ways to economically make up for this with AI and automation in our economic production. North Korea does not have this. They have virtually none. And so that country is going to probably fall off the map by 2100 at this rate. South Korea may be able to automate itself, with that horrifyingly low rate. They may be able to delay the inevitable for a while. The United States has AI. We're innovators in that particular realm. We may be able to maintain our production for a longer while. However, it's not going to be a very pretty picture in doing so, and it may turn larger companies fully reliant on AI for production. And I haven't even mentioned the AI robot girlfriends yet on this particular episode, although I've mentioned it in the past. The implications of these, if you're of the Christian faith like I am, the implications are horrifying. If these modern women with these higher standards in the United States, in the West, happen to maintain or continue with their exceedingly high standards, with $200,000 incomes being the bare minimum and 6 feet being the bare minimum height, if they continue to act this way, then they're going to get replaced by these AI robot women. And right now I've seen a lot of the demos here on YouTube of these things, and they are technologically not there yet. They can't walk. They're not anatomically correct. However, at the rate that this development is going, we're about, I want to say 3 to 5 years out from them being viable technologically. Economically, they're not viable yet because right now they're running, the price tag that I see on these demos seems to be about $150,000, which means that only the very wealthiest of men can afford these. However, get that price down to $30,000 and then you're starting to talk about, regular men being able to afford these particular robotic companions for the price of an extra car payment. That's not good. That's very bad. And I think men, unfortunately, we're at the situation where, because divorce law is so stacked against men at this point, that they're going to view that as a viable alternative to losing half of everything they own and to losing any potential children. And if these robots have childbirthing capabilities, like a test tube, for example, we're going to see men go this route. So women need to do better in order to prevent this from happening, but men also need to do better too, because we need to up our life game, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm upping my life game by going to the gym, by continuing to develop my bowling, and continuing to develop my professional career at the young age of 53. But this is a situation. This is where we're at, guys. This is where we're at as the United States these days. It is ugly. It's not as ugly as some other countries like the Koreas, for example. but still not very good. And I think social media has a lot to do with this downfall. And, there's a little bit of feminism sprinkled in there. I wouldn't say that that's the primary cause. Women who, it's like, oh, don't settle. You need a man who's going to entirely take care of you. Well, what you really want is a team. If you're peasants and you get together and you build your kingdom together, that is more substantial than being a woman who picks the winner at the finish line and goes that way. It's also, the former is also far more likely and far more attainable. But I'm building my life because I've determined that she has to find me, because I've tried to do it my way for a long time and it's not gone very well. I've already mentioned about the harassment accusations in the church, which were false, entirely false. But I'm going to do this, I'm going to let God take care of that detail for me, but I'm just going to continue to work on myself because I believe that's what He would want me to do. And so that is where we're at. That is my spiel for the day. This is Jason and then the Simpademic. Enjoy the rest of your day. It's about 70 degrees here in Minnesota today. It's been very nice, and I have the air conditioning running in my place because it faces to the south and the sun just comes in pretty strong, and it would be 85 degrees in my place if I didn't have the AC on right now. So anyway, you folks have a good rest of the day. I'll be bowling tonight. I get to bowl. I always tell myself that every time I pull up, I get to bowl today. And I get to live today, and I live my life as best as I can. Try to up my life game, not just necessarily for having a particular woman notice me, but also for myself. It's very important. I'll be back in my new gym today and this week 3 times. So anyway, you folks enjoy your weekends, and we will see you later. Peace out, homies.